Okay, good afternoon, Veritas scientists. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. First, we're going to start by going over the answer for yesterday's problem. So it says Tuesday 4-7. That was from yesterday. Our question said that granite is a type of igneous rock. New Hampshire is known as the granite state. Explain how the mountains in New Hampshire were formed using your knowledge of igneous rocks. So I underlined the actual question because I'm going to start my answer by restating this question and giving a direct answer. Okay, so it says explain how the mountains in New Hampshire were formed. So that's how I'm going to start my answer, is by answering that question. What I wrote here, the mountains in New Hampshire were formed by, I just turned that into an answer. Explain how the mountains in New Hampshire were formed. The mountains in New Hampshire were formed by volcanoes. So this was really my answer. I just restated the question. The mountains in New Hampshire were formed, and then I gave my answer, by volcanoes. And that is correct. Igneous rocks are formed by volcanoes. Then I am going to give some evidence. I know this because granite is a type of igneous rock, which are formed by volcanoes. Since New Hampshire's nickname is the granite state, I assume that there's a lot of granite. And the granite was formed by volcanoes millions of years ago. When the volcanoes erupted, the lava eventually cooled into granite rock, forming the mountains in New Hampshire. So those mountains in the granite state are made up of mostly granite. So, like I explained here, the mountains were erupting. So we started with some mountains. The lava, if you watch yesterday's video, the lava makes its way up because of the cracks in the mantle. At that point, it's called magma, and the magma makes its way up, and eventually when it comes out, it is then called lava, but it's really the same stuff. It is rock that is liquid. So it's liquid, really, really hot rock. That's going to pour out, and it's going to make a pile, and then that's going to harden and cool, and then it's going to make another pile, which is going to harden and cool, and another pile, which is going to harden and cool, and then we end up in New Hampshire. We ended up with all these giant mountains. Okay, it took millions and millions of years to happen, but that's what happens. That's what happened. The lava continued to come out, and then it would cool, and then it would harden, and more lava would come out, and it would cool, and it would harden, and it made these giant stacks of lava, which were giant rocks, which were forming those big mountains. So that was the answer to yesterday's problem. So good job if you got that. Okay, and then today we are going to learn something new. We're going to learn about metamorphic rocks and the rock cycle. So I'm excited about this lesson. I hope you guys are too. And we'll get started with some vocabulary. Okay, so the first vocabulary word I have. So yesterday we learned about sedimentary rock. So I'll go back to yesterday. It says sedimentary rock is formed when sediment settles to the bottom of a body of water and hardens over time in layers through cementation. And you end up with a rock with all layers like this one. You can see the layers going across. This is a sedimentary rock, which was formed by sediment. An igneous rock we just talked about are formed from volcanoes when the lava cools and forms solid rock. And the word igneous means from fire. So that can hopefully help you to remember that igneous rocks are formed from volcanoes that erupt, and then that lava cools and hardens into igneous rock. So we've learned so far about these two categories of rocks. The third and final category are called metamorphic rocks. So metamorphic, meta means time. Morphic, morph, means to change. So think about how the Power Rangers, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they change from a person into like a big robot, right? Or a Pokemon, they will morph from one creature to another creature. Like Pikachu morphs and changes into Raichu, right? I'm going way back with that. But anyways, metamorphic means to change over time. So metamorphic rock changes over time. So metamorphic rock is any rock that has changed from one type of rock to another type of rock due to heat, pressure, and time. Okay, so metamorphic rocks change over time with heat and pressure, and they change over time. Okay, so There are many different types of metamorphic rocks, right? It's any type of rock that changed. It was one type of rock, so say it was a granite rock at one point, and then this is going to end up deep down into the earth, right? Maybe it's going to fall through an earthquake, or it's going to make its way down deep into the earth over millions of years, right? And if this then melts, and all these minerals that are in it are going to melt, right? And they are going to eventually harden and form a new type of rock that has different minerals in it. So those minerals won't be the same, so it won't still be a granite rock. It will then be some other kind of rock because the minerals in it will not be the same types of minerals that make it a granite rock. There will be different minerals making it a different type of rock. So metamorphic rocks just means that they changed from one type of rock, the minerals changed over time, and it became a different type of rock. Okay? So, here's an important fact. There are thousands of types of rocks. So, this is one of them. This is another type of rock. Even this is actually a mineral, but there are thousands of types of rocks, but they all fit into one of the following three categories. So there are thousands of different kinds of rocks depending on what minerals are in them. Will depend on what type of rock it is. But no matter what type of rock it is, it's going to fit into one of these three groups of rocks. Okay? So it's either a sedimentary rock, or it's an igneous rock, or it's a metamorphic rock. It can fit into one of these three groups. So like I'm saying, granite fits into the igneous rock group. Okay? This rock here, I'm not sure what minerals are in it, so I'm not sure what type of rock this actually is, but I know that it fits into the sedimentary rock group based on the way that it was formed. Okay? So all different types of rock fit into one of these three categories. Okay? They're either sedimentary, igneous, or metamorphic. With me so far with that? Give yourself some snaps. You guys are doing a great job with this. Now our second vocabulary word I want to continue. Today's April 8th, 2020. It's Wednesday. This is important, and we're going to spend some time talking about this. This is called the rock cycle. Okay, so what's different about the rock cycle from other cycles that we've learned about? We learned about the water cycle. The water cycle always goes in the same order, right? You have evaporation, then the gas makes its way up into the sky, and then it gets cool, and you have condensation. We'll go into this again with more detail, but we already did this year, so this should make sense to you. Evaporation, then condensation. Then when those clouds get too heavy, we have precipitation, and it rains. And then all that water runs off back into the body of water, which it will then evaporate. Okay, it will all collect here, and then it will evaporate again. So what I'm showing you this because the water cycle goes in this order all the time. It goes in the same order, and it never changes. Evaporation to condensation to precipitation to runoff to collection. Then it evaporates, it condensates, it precipitates, then it runs off and it collects. Same thing, and it continues in a cycle like this, and it's always the same order. Got that? What's cool about the rock cycle is it does not always go in the same order, and we're going to talk about that right now. So the rock cycle says, over millions of years, rocks change between the three groups that all rocks fit into, which we just talked about, sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic. So in the rock cycle, they change between those three groups, but it's not always in the same order. Most cycles, like the life cycle or the water cycle, always go in the same order. The rock cycle does not. And that, I think, is really cool about the rock cycle. Okay, so here, let me explain that. We have sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic rocks. Okay, so let's say we had a volcano. Let me get a blank piece of paper so I can try to draw some models here. We got a volcano. Whoop. and the volcano, the magma makes its way up, and it comes out as lava, and it cools like we were saying earlier. It's going to pile up and pile up and pile up and then harden and cool, and this is going to be igneous rock. Okay? We've already talked about this. So, that igneous rock, we'll say it granite for now, right? Because that's a type of igneous rock. That igneous rock gets weathered, right? The weather hits it, weathering happens to it, and it breaks off into tiny little pieces, and then erosion takes it. If any of these words don't make sense, please go back and watch the 4 videos before this. All right, so this igneous rock is being weathered, then erosion is taking those little weathered pieces of sediment, and guess what? They might eventually land in a body of water. Those are my waves. And then they're going to settle to the bottom of that body of water, and they're going to harden in layers. And if they harden in layers, the sediment hardens into layers and forms a rock. Then what kind of rock did it turn into? It turned into a sedimentary rock. Okay? So we just saw that an igneous rock that came out of the volcano and was formed, if it breaks into little pieces, then that igneous rock, those tiny little pieces of sediment, will then become sedimentary rock. So we can see how an igneous rock could become a sedimentary rock. Now, what if this igneous rock, what if there was, say, as it was coming down here, there was a big crack in the earth, right? Or an earthquake might happen, or there's just maybe between these mountains, there's this big giant hole that forms over many, many years. So what if those little pieces of sediment, or bigger pieces of sediment maybe, those pieces make their way down deep into the earth, and with some heat and pressure, okay, as you get closer down to the center of the earth, it's really, really hot, so you're going to have some heat. You're going to have the whole gravity of the whole earth and all the rock and all the mountains and all the oceans that are all pushing down on it. You're going to get lots of pressure. Lots of weight is pressing down on these pieces of rock. So then those pieces of rock melt because it's so hot. The pressure pushes them and the minerals eventually change. And when it finally cools and when it finally hardens, we now have a metamorphic rock. So that same igneous rock, if it landed in a body of water, would have turned into a sedimentary rock after many, many years. That same piece of rock, if it makes its way down into the center of the earth, could become a metamorphic rock. So this igneous rock could have become a sedimentary rock or a metamorphic rock. See, it's not like a regular cycle where it always becomes the next one. That's not true about the rock cycle. It could become either one. Okay? Same thing with the sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock, if it makes its way down and becomes part of the magma or the lava, and then it erupts and cools, then that sedimentary rock can change into an igneous rock. Or if it made its way further down into the earth and it melted and changed due to heat and pressure and time, if the minerals change and now it's a different type of rock, that sedimentary rock has changed over time. It has become a metamorphic rock. So sedimentary rock could change into either of those rocks, right? Same thing with the metamorphic rock. If it ends up being weathered and breaking off and going and landing in a body of water, then that metamorphic rock could become, after millions of years, it could become a sedimentary rock. Or if it lands and it makes its way up into the magma and into the lava and forms from a volcano, then it could then have changed into an igneous rock. So you'll see the arrows are going in all directions from each of these types of rock. And that is what the rock cycle is. Okay? So basically, any rock, any of the thousands of types of rock, depending on what minerals are in them, will depend on what type of rock it is. But any of those rocks can fit into one of these 3 categories, which can then change into either of the other 2, or it could change into a different type of metamorphic rock. Or an igneous rock could even change into a different type of igneous rock. And a sedimentary rock could then change into a different type of sedimentary rock. So that is what's cool about the rock cycle, is that you never know which way it's going to go. It could go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and then change, right? It could go back and forth this way. It could go back and forth this way. It could jump from this way to this way to that way to this way. You never really know. It depends on, over time, what happens to those rocks. All right. Give yourself some snaps. Nice work today. I hope that made sense. We're going to move on to, let's see what question I wrote for you. Here's the question, and I would like you guys to answer tonight, and we'll start tomorrow's lesson by going over this answer. It says, Wednesday, April 8th, 2020, the type of rock depends on what minerals the rock has in it. Okay, so this igneous rock, the type of rock this is granite, because it has feldspar. Remember we talked about this yesterday? It has the minerals in it that make it a granite rock. It has feldspar, it has quartz, and it has a few other minerals in it. And one of them is the shiny stuff. What's that called? Mica, right? So you can see that those three things are in here. If you look closely, the white is the quartz, the feldspar, I think is the black colored stuff, and the shiny stuff that you can see is mica, right? So this rock, based on the minerals that are in it, this is a granite rock, okay? So the type of rock depends on what minerals are in it, okay? Here's the question. How do geologists, scientists who study rocks, identify what type of rock they have found? So say I'm walking on a trail, I'm up in the mountain, and I am a geologist, and I come across this rock. How am I going to know that this is a granite rock? How is a scientist going to know that? They don't have all the types of rock. There's thousands and thousands of them. How are they going to know what type of rock this is? So when they are studying rocks and they find a rock like this, what type of rock is it? You can tell by looking at it how it was formed. You can tell it's a sedimentary rock, but you don't know what type of rock this is. Even if they found this one, they don't know what type it is. So how are geologists going to identify what type of rock they have found? And that is where we will pick up tomorrow. All right. Thank you for watching. Everybody have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.